Live. Hello and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the fourth episode of Alumni Talks with our recommended practitioners. I'm your host Sanjana Purohit from ICHARS, and today we are in conversation with the counselor Nisha. I would quickly like to introduce about our organization. ICHARS is an organization dedicated to behavioral, emotional, and mental growth for individuals from all the areas of the society through education, intervention, and guidance. Our institution is based on a solid value system of quality and philosophy of positive psychology, where we believe that therapy is not about focusing on the weakness, but it's also about finding strength in an individual. Before we begin, I would also like to mention about our MHP challenge, an initiative by mental health practitioners requesting people to seek help before it's too late. I would also request everyone to start a watch party so that your friends and family can benefit out of it. And you can also ask us questions so that we could answer to them. About our speaker Nisha. Nisha is a professional counselor trained from Swinburne University Technology, Australia. She is a certified hypnotherapist, a CHCP practitioner trained under ICHARS. She has been an active mental health space since the year 2012. She is the founder of Mind Wellness and the program partner for the Mindfully You program. So yes, Nisha, can you tell us something about yourself and what do you do? Since I have already done that, but we would like to know it from you.
Sure. Hey, Sanjana, thanks for having me. I kind of wanted to just say that it's an honor to be associated, firstly, with ICHARS because you guys are doing such great work around creating awareness for mental health. So I really appreciate you having me, and I obviously appreciate having been on the journey that I've been with ICHARS. So a little bit about me. Now, most people usually go off on their credentials, but you've already mentioned that I'm a counselor and I also practice with hypnotherapy. So what I like to say is that my orientation has always been one of curiosity. So I'm a person who's generally very curious, and earlier in my life, I think since my teen years, I think I've always been fascinated and curious about the human mind, how it works, the different theories out there around it, our experience. Because if you notice, every single second in our life, what we experience, how we go through life, is colored by our mind. So it's a very fascinating subject. That's kind of the long and short of why I've been pulled into the profession that I'm in right now and continue to journey with people. But since you asked me about what I do and how my work sort of came about to be, it's based on this very orientation. My goal is to empower people to understand that the journey that they take in learning more about their own mind and focusing on their mental well-being is not something that should be viewed negatively, as is commonly seen today. But
Yes.
I believe in journeying with my clients to empower them in a way that they can own that journey for themselves, and also be able to find that strength and resource that lies within them to create the life they wish to have. So that is the core philosophy of mind wellness and why I do the work, all the projects that I do, in fact. We'll get to some of those later. But I know you had some questions for
Yes.
me, so let's go.
So my question to you is that what are the types of cases that you handle?
Okay. So, in my private practice, the core focus of my cases has been around habits, patterns, and addiction. So, more behavior-based issues that people are struggling with and cannot overcome. So that's one type of case that I work with, and this generally ends up being, more of the dominant cases that come across my desk. But I've also worked with clients who have struggled with in some ways with their emotional regulation. So what this means is that people who are experiencing emotions that they feel that they cannot control. So this comes around sadness and grief, sometimes, overwhelming fear and anxiety. So basically, the kind of people who approach us, and I'm sure you will relate to this as therapists, especially who practice in the space of hypnotherapy, it's usually cases where, our cognitive way of resolving issues falls short and people require some further intervention. So
Yes.
that's kind of what I focus on. And in my past work that I was doing with welfare organizations, I was also practicing family therapy. So that was working with children and their families.
Wow. So my next question is that what are the different types of approaches that you follow?
Okay, so there are a few. Now, obviously, given the fact that we're doing this interview, I have to mention right at the
Yes.
top, it is cognitive hypnotic coaching. So the CHCP process. So in this case, is not coaching. Sorry, it will be cognitive hypnotic psychotherapy. That's the overarching
Hmm.
framework that I'm using right now with clients, and I know we'll get into the discussion of this in just a bit. But apart from that, I also use emotion focused therapy and
Hmm.
experiential therapy in my sessions with clients.
Okay. So can you tell me what is experiential therapy in brief?
Okay, sure. So experiential therapy, actually it does tie in with a little bit of the hypno work that we do. It's just the overarching umbrella that comes under techniques where clients use expressive tools, even their bodies, to, participate in activities that reenact and recreate situations from the past. So if you actually look at it, hypnotherapy is at the core of that. I mean, at the core of the
Hmm.
practices that we use, that is also there. But there are also other techniques that you can do with a person. And, while these were techniques that I learned earlier, I feel like they're more relevant right now because there's a lot of work that now we have to translate online. That means I
Yes.
have to be able to do, activities and processes whereby I may not be able to take the person in front of me into a hypnotic state and do a full hypnotic session. So experiential therapy is one aspect, and then emotion focus is the other aspect,
Hmm.
whereby we teach people how to cope with their emotions. First step, become aware of their emotions, understand what's going
Hmm.
on for them, cope, and then regulate with them better. So that's emotion focus. This is
Wow.
the trio of things that we work with.
That's beautiful. And my other question to you is that how do you use CHCP in your practice?
There we go. Okay, so how do we use CHCP? Okay, in general, right? I felt like so this particular, and I want to put this information out there because while we learn a lot of therapeutic interventions and a lot of tools, what I like about the concept of cognitive hypnotic psychotherapy is that it's a framework. It's a
Yes.
lovely framework that you can use regardless of your orientation. You could be a behavior therapist. You could be someone who's doing somatic and body work. You could be someone who is doing, out and out psychodynamic therapy, for example, psychodynamic psychotherapy. It doesn't matter what your specialization or approach to mental health is. CHCP's framework can be applied regardless of what format of therapy you're using. So how I use it is basically because a lot of the elements of cognitive hypnotic psychotherapy, the way we were trained, actually involves tools from hypnosis, from NLP, from CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, and solution focused work. I actually kind
Hmm.
of use the framework pretty much as it is with the specific techniques that come with it. But I'm putting this out as a little PSA for everyone out there listening. If you're a psychotherapist, please look these guys up. It will change the way you practice because, like I said, it's a framework that anybody can use.
So, any specific technique or therapy that you like the most in CHP?
Okay, so I can't point to the technique or therapy that I like the most because
Hmm.
honestly, CHCP is like a Swiss Army knife. It's basically the Swiss Army knife when it comes to therapeutic tools and interventions. So I love the fact that it's like this, that
Hmm.
regardless of what's happening with the client in front of me, there's always a way to move the case forward. There's always something you can do with a client. So I love that it provides me with that. Now, what specifically about CHCP that's very valuable is, as I mentioned, the framework. So what I can do is get into it a little bit um, what it does is it identifies. Actually, I'm going to step one step backwards. The core of it and why I resonate with it so much is it is completely client centric. So at the heart of it, it is a person centered therapy. It is respecting and honoring the client where they're at, and it puts them as much in the driver's seat as it puts the therapist. So you're
Yes.
journeying with your client. And what it does is it's very simple. It journeys with the client to explore where they're at right now, where they want to go, the future that they want to create for themselves. What do they need to do to get to that future? And obviously, if we could do what we needed to do to the dream of our lives, it would be perfect. Like, sorry, I'm going to slow down a little bit. But if we could just end up magically doing all the things we needed to do to create the life that we want, then we wouldn't need therapy. So obviously, there are roadblocks, there are obstacles, and there are hurdles in the way that stop us from doing the things that we need to do. And
Yes.
that is what specifically this framework helps you identify as a therapist and also as a client. So when you're sitting in that session, even as a client, you understand what is happening in therapy. You're not left second guessing what you're going to be working on today, what you're doing, and where the process is going. And also, what I like about it is that there is a clear start and an end to therapy. There is some structure around it. So that's I feel if you're asking me what's of value, I feel the framework itself, and it's called acronymed soft C, but I didn't want to
Yes.
break it down in the format of the acronyms because there's a bit of technical detail there. But the essence of what it is this clear structure around therapy, and that's what I feel I value the most.
I completely agree as a counselor because I used to be in a position that I don't know how do I start. And then with
There we
CHCP,
go.
I understood that this is how I go. So my next question is that what are the issues or the things that you have faced before learning CHCP? The challenges that you
Okay,
have faced.
sure. So I think one of the key ones is exactly what you just mentioned. So whether it was in my time as a practicing counselor or when I was using hypnotherapy or NLP based techniques, it doesn't really matter. You will always meet clients or that client that will somewhat slightly stumble you, that will make you think, oh God, now what do I do with this person? How do we overcome this specific thing? How do we
I
move
come.
as
Yes.
a therapist? Yeah. I mean, look, I'm going to put this out there because I want people to hear
Hmm.
this as well. We are therapists, we're also human. We know where you are at, we know how to journey with you, but sometimes, especially in cases that are a bit more complex where it's multi-layered and there are a lot of issues, sometimes we have to be able to have an approach. I would say we have to be able to have an approach that is this Swiss Army knife thing that CHCP is that we talk about. So when you don't have a Swiss Army knife that can literally, create a step forward for you regardless of which situation you're in, sometimes you have to get creative, sometimes you have to get adaptive, sometimes you get, even stumped in session. So what happens is that has been one of the important factors as to why it's been difficult, what was difficult for me before CHCP came
Hmm.
along into my life. And I also felt like um, sometimes what was also a problem, especially in the space of hypnotherapy based frameworks and practices when we do what we do, um, the client, I also feel like the client is sometimes not, they don't fully feel empowered. You explain the process to them, you explain the idea of a journey to them, but they sometimes are left second guessing. Oh, what was this about? Or what was that about? What was this thing about? Or what was that thing about? And
Hmm.
how is this person moving me forward? Exactly what's happening? So,
Yes.
or even when you're doing experiential work or any kind of, say maybe even an emotion focused piece, as a therapist,
Hmm.
you know what you're doing, but your client is on this journey with you, but they're still sort of questioning themselves. What is this about? Where is this going? So I feel like CHCP is such a beautiful tool that allows the client to actually feel empowered and also to engage a lot more in this process proactively. So
Yes.
yeah, I mean, I know these were, I would say, getting that engagement and that buy-in, as well as moving therapy sessions along. I think those would be in the zone of the uh, issues that I was facing before I encountered CHCP. And by the way, I want to make a small disclaimer. I'm not saying all these nice things just because they called me here to interview me. I have genuinely found such a huge difference in my approach to being able to work through cases with this framework. So yeah, just putting that out there in case it seems like these guys are just talking about this fancy framework. So what is it all about? Go look it up. It's actually a valuable tool for any therapist.
And how has CHCP helped you? Like as you said.
Ah, okay, so how has CHCP helped me? Now, specifically, like I think I've already covered this a little bit up the top. It has helped me to definitely conceptualize cases better. So, as therapists, we always talk about case conceptualization, right? So, when it
Yes.
comes to case conceptualization, sometimes what happens is that you map a journey with the client as the client's presenting information for to you. But what ends up happening is that you're also sometimes moving things one step at a time as you're discovering more, which I even do now, even when we're using CHCP. But what it has specifically helped me with is to actually create a bird's eye view of my process before it has even begun. So having
Yes.
said that, it's not to say that you preemptively know exactly what therapy, what technique, what intervention is going to go there right off the bat. But you and the client both have a roadmap of how this process is going to be. So there's no
Yes.
guesswork and there's no, um, you know, apprehension, especially with clients who are apprehensive about therapy, who have issues, who have struggled with going through other therapeutic processes in the past and really find it problematic. I think that CHCP comes in a way that it allows clients to feel more comfortable in a therapeutic process. I think that's been one of the most helpful things for me in using CHCP.
And can you provide us with a case study?
A case,
Like,
okay.
did you have?
So
Yes.
yeah, so you know what? This specific case study, Sanjana and I have talked about it. Oh my goodness. So it's quite a complex case. Her question actually to me was, Nisha, can you think of a case that, if you had this before CHCP versus when you actually use CHCP to address it, would have been a very different outcome. So another thing, this will tie me back to some of the benefits of it and going through this process with the client is that sometimes, and this is what my case is related to, sometimes especially when it comes to pattern related issues, you can encounter a problem or a specific issue or presenting symptom that your client comes with, and your biggest worry is when you've used all your tools and techniques, what if the problem comes back? Or
Yes.
you've tried a lot of your tools and techniques and that problem is not going away. So, that's
That's
kind of
the
why,
scariest part.
yeah, because people, when you tell them that you're using hypnotic based tools or you're using these kind of interventions, they also have an expectation that it's going to go a certain way, that the interventions is going to go a certain way and it's going to resolve the problem that you bring to them, which is what it's intended to do in the first place, right? So in the example of the case study that I'm about to share with you, there are lots of layers and there are quite a few techniques, but I'm going to, for the audience listening, keep it as generic as possible and walk you through how it's a step-by-step process and how I had to go through a lot of the tools in that Swiss Army knife to get the client to where they needed to be. So just a disclaimer, I'm going to describe this client without a name, and I have changed up almost all the details of this case to obviously to maintain confidentiality. So it's just an outline of
Yes. Yes.
what what the process was like. So this is about a male, roughly 45 years old, and had quite a bit of an issue with eating and a food-based addiction around, fried food, junk food, a lot of oily food, etc. So what ended up happening with this client is that this client had also came to me with a relationship-based issue that was presenting at the same time. So this client's concern is basically that every time they were feeling sad or they felt upset, they would eat. Okay,
Okay.
so we went through the process to deal with the relationship-based issue
Mm.
first, because that's kind of what was the trigger. The person was saying those feelings were causing the person to eat, the
Mm.
fatty foods and all the junk food. So we worked, I used a couple of processes, we addressed the relationship-based issue, and it didn't work. So it worked briefly, so the client realized that they had some control over it, but the problem was not going away. The addiction and the craving to junk food was still too high for this person. And then
Mm.
in our framework, there's actually specific technique that is meant for patterns. It's called reframing or N-step reframing, not to be confused with other reframing techniques. It's a specific
Mm.
one. So I used that, and oh my goodness, I used it a couple of times, and it still didn't work. And so then this
Can
person's
you
like,
explain? Can you explain briefly what is it, so that our audience could just get through it?
oh, okay. So
Mm.
basic, yeah, because I just was like, how do we want to go into detail on this? Okay, so it's I would say it's a mix. It's a hypnotic process and also a kinesthetic process where you connect with a part in the body that is causing a certain pattern to come up, and you're basically getting that part to come into alignment with a client's goals. So say this person wants to stop eating fried food, for example.
Mm.
You connect with the person's part that wants to eat fried food, and you explore with it if it is open. So whatever this reason is, this client still wants to eat that fried food, is can we
Mm.
address that need or that reason with other alternative behavior patterns that can satisfy that need within a person? So instead of eating fried food, something else that can help the person cope with that need in a healthier way. That's a summary of what that technique is. I won't go
Okay.
into
Yes.
all the
Mm.
technicalities of it.
Yes.
So using that process a couple of times also wasn't working. So I'm like, what's going on over here? So it's usually
Mm.
about a part, right? A specific part. So,
Yes.
the next lesson. So this is going through a few layers. Now I'm pulling out the next layer of this wasabi knife. And okay,
Mm.
so this specific part, what's going on with it? Can we support this part? And before this as well, in terms of the relationship, we also explored the past with this client, where this relationship issues stem from, what the concerns were, and we addressed that as well. And
Mm.
in terms of the relational aspect, and in fact even emotional regulation, the client had come a long way, but it was just this specific thing about eating junk food that wasn't going away. So what ended up happening is, even after addressing this issue of the specific part that wanted to eat, there was no result. And so I actually sat down with my client and I was like, okay, let's explore this a little bit more. What is
Mm.
it? What is this feeling about eating? So this client basically kind of described it in a way that it was like the freedom to do what I wanted to do. It
Okay.
was about having the freedom to just kind of like have a cheat, or to rebel and like have that,
Mm.
in a way, that as well, that it was their little cheat day or their little thing that they get to break the
Mm.
rules around as well, because obviously in this point the rule is you don't eat the sugary food or the fried food or
Mm.
the junk food, right? Whatever it is.
Yes.
So now the problem is that because this client was also looking to hit a specific weight goal, a specific target in terms of what they wanted for their body, the rule was also
Mm.
very strict. So on one hand, there was a part of the body that was wanting to create some very strict rules around this. And this was something that we had actually surfaced a little bit earlier, that the goal and the target was very, very clear. But at the same time, this was a little bit of a cheat mechanism. So then we went into another process, which was, okay,
Mm.
Then it started to become a bit clearer to me as this person was talking, is that, but I also have my rule, like not my rule in a way, but my focus, like this is what I want to achieve. So it was about actually ultimately just bringing balance between these two because they were diametrically opposed. So when we did that final session where both these parts, I literally do it this way because that's kind of one part of that
Mhm.
process, is that both these
Yes.
parts were then able to come together. And then it was
Mhm.
about negotiating. How can we adjust the rules? How can we permit the cheat days and also help the client get to the goals that they wanted to achieve? So this is actually a very common feature and phenomenon of habit-based issues. But
Mhm.
what ends up happening is that sometimes, doing the processes that I mentioned above usually takes care of the problem. But if
Yes.
it doesn't, then you still can go through a lot of these layers and might find, so if I hadn't addressed this bit, chances are, very, very good chances are, even though the client had gotten better with it, I would have expected maybe a couple of months down the line, I would have gotten a phone call saying, "Hey, Nisha, you know what? My problem's not done." Because if we hadn't gone through that specific piece,
Yes.
then chances are that inner struggle would have created more internal, sort of that inner tussle between the client would have created more internal conflict. Again, bring the client down another rabbit hole with the emotions, and it would have created it would have left the problem exactly as it was.
Yes. So
So
you went to the roots and
so
then
you have to go through a lot of explorations, and that's why I said Swiss Army
yes.
knife, because you basically get to explore every facet of the case and every facet of a client's issue to get them to their desired outcome. So the fun fact about this is this client actually did not fully give it up. And but you see,
Okay.
it's not something I impose as a therapist. This was the client's own arrangement with own internal guidance with their own body system. Is that they left a specific slot for themselves to eat what they wanted to eat, and a timing and a
Okay.
way to go about it. So they mapped it out for themselves that they would have the rule as well and the cheat as well in a way that balanced itself out to get the client to the goal that they wanted to, and they stayed on the wagon. So
Wow.
that's that.
So it's a win-win situation on both the sides.
Exactly. Because here's the other thing, right? So a lot of times, and I would say be mindful of this when you are working with any good therapist. I think the goals for therapy or the outcomes and the desired outcomes for therapy cannot come from a therapist. I
Yes.
actually feel like that's my orientation, and that's where I'm more comfortable with, is you can explore goals, you can explore outcomes with your clients, you can explore possibilities with them, but what they want to achieve and ultimately what they draw up as their vision for, what they draw up as their vision for what they want to achieve from a therapeutic process has to come for them, has to come from them for it to work.
Yes. Yes. I totally
So that
agree
was
with you.
my case example. Sorry if I overran, but I hope
No,
that
no.
helps.
So Pranita has asked you that
Yes.
any one of PHP technique that you like the most.
Any, oh, actually, I would go with end step reframing simply because a lot of my cases are revolving around habits and patterns and, behavior patterns, especially that people are trying to overcome. So that reframing process is actually nice because it's quite targeted, and you empower the client as well because this is a technique that you can actually teach them to do it themselves. One of those techniques that you can actually teach them to
Yes.
do it themselves. And it's something that, I have a lot of clients that struggle, especially when it comes to habits and patterns, right? They want to do something about it. They cannot, they cannot accept, and I've had this with clients, they cannot accept the quick fix. Now, say for example, there was an emotion issue related to a specific pattern that has emerged. You settle some of those issues, but the pattern refuses to go simply because it's not within a client's belief system that it can be gone like that, or someone else can
Yes.
fix it for me. So
Yes.
this is actually a very powerful tool. Say, okay, you really want to fix your problem and to help it along as well, then this is something you can do too.
Yes.
So yeah.
She has also asked that what are the
Uh,
issues that you faced. Did you hear me?
yes, yes, I can hear you. Tell me.
Yes. So, what are the issues that you have faced while working with clients? Challenges that you have been working with clients. So, any challenges if you had?
If I have. Okay. So I think I have touched on this a little bit earlier, but I think one of the key challenges, and this is what I do want to talk about today, is when they first come into the room in and of itself, that's one of the biggest challenges. Um, in a consultation as well, the biggest
Okay.
challenge to overcome is actually the stigma around mental health. Plain and
So,
simple. I've had clients open up conversations telling me that, either they've experienced therapy and it's not gone well for them, number one.
hmm,
Number two, they come in with a lot of skepticism.
hmm,
They are very, very, uh, unsure whether this will work for them, whether it will not work for them. And I think the final piece to this is that stemming from that whether this will work for them or not, it's always about, you know, having the sense of, is this person going to do something to me? Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, it's okay. I know the field that we work in with hypnotherapy, that's actually
yes,
common myth and misconception. But even in traditional therapy formats, I feel like it's about who drives therapy. That's one of the biggest challenges. So it's a lot
yes,
of times clients also go to a therapist saying that, hey, you fix me, you fix
hmm,
my problems. It's your job to fix my problems. So, that kind of mindset, and I don't blame people because this is some of the common stereotypes, common myths. In fact, I just had a nice dialogue session with my colleagues online as well. And you can go check this out on Mind Wellness. We actually touched on the common myths and misconceptions about therapy. And
hmm,
this falls way up there. It's who's really driving therapy, who is
hmm,
in the driver's seat in this situation. Is it the therapist? Is it the client? And that's kind of why I feel like it's important to set these expectations very clear, that as a therapist, you're guiding them, you're journeying with them, you're supporting them. But it's not a passive thing that they receive. They have to engage with the process, they have to interact with it. They have to
yes,
be, have a willingness and a desire to want that change within for them to go through it. So I think that is the one where having a tool like CHCP is very helpful because you engage them right from the get-go and you let them know that they have some power in this process and it's not something that they passively sit back and just receive. So yeah, I hope that answered the question. Those were a couple of the things around the mental health stigmas, as well as who sits where in the therapeutic process is one of the bigger challenges.
so, and how do you overcome those challenges if you could just help her out?
So I think that's exactly it, right? It's about setting
Hmm,
expectations. It's about setting expectations right from the beginning and having the conversation upfront. So if a client is expecting you to fix their problem for them, you explain to them. And actually, like I said, if you're in this particular practice that we're doing, that is already laid out from the beginning, that this is a process where you're going to be working with them and that it is a journey that the two of you take together as a therapist and a client. And I think to set the expectations very clearly and talk it out. So you
hmm,
talk to a client. That's why we all have consultation sessions as a therapist. Is you talk to a
right.
client, connect with them, relate with them, set these expectations very clearly from the beginning, so that down the road they don't turn around and question, and also let them know what the journey is going to be like. So, say for example, I'll just highlight this clearly. If you know a
Hmm,
client, say maybe is struggling with a lot of really intense negative emotions, or has been struggling with a habit or pattern, say for example, in my case, when I work with habits and patterns for a very long time, you can let them know that at some point in therapy, that the general arc is that things get better immediately from the first sessions. But in case it doesn't as well, not to worry, because it's just feedback. So that's kind of how I set my expectations from the client, that while we're working together, everything that happens is good. It is
yes.
nothing but feedback. So if you set expectations with clients very, very clearly, then you can avoid this problem coming up later that, oh, you didn't do this, it's not working. That's one of the very important things to address right from the get. Oh, ye nahi hua,
Well said.
matlab, and I guess using a little bit of Hindi here, but this didn't
Hmm.
happen, so therapy is not working. That's the trap. And like I said, painfully, I have heard this before when I've not set expectations well, simply because that's when you don't want to lose your connect and buy-in with the client. So my tip or
Yes.
suggestion is always lay expectations out very clearly from the beginning.
So I hope that we
I
have
hope
answered
that
your
helped. I'm
question.
sorry. What was who was this who asked this question?
Pranita.
Pranita, I hope that answered your question. And yeah, feel free to leave us more comments
And
on this chat
yes,
if you have any.
she has also asked that do you remember your first case and elaborate your experience while handling it? Your first case.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. So I tell you what, in the essence of moving, I know because we have a couple of conversations and things to get
You can
through.
go ahead.
I'll let Pranita, here's the thing. If we have time at the end of this, I will get into it and I will tell you a little bit
Sure.
more about it.
So you can go ahead now also. It's fine.
It's fine. You sure?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so I was actually initially my training was in hypnotherapy. So on my sort of like hypnotherapy and NLP. So that was my training and qualifications when I first started out as a therapist. And this was my first client was someone who had come to quit smoking, and that was terrifying for me because honestly, when someone comes to you for quitting smoking as a
Hmm.
hypnotherapist, but you see, that's why I said that's the benefit of having good frameworks in your life, because
Right.
so while CHCP is now sort of, I've evolved
Hmm.
the use of my framework from the past and to now with CHCP as well. But a
Hmm.
good framework when you're working through therapy helps you to move a case along, no matter what is happening. So it was nerve wracking because the result is very visceral, visible, and tangible. This person's at X
Yes.
cigarettes and they want to go down to zero. And that's
Wow.
that's kind of your mark as a therapist.
Hmm.
And I have to say, I am extremely proud that client and is one of my oldest clients and still sends me messages about the fact that they've not gone back to it. And this was,
Wow.
yeah, way back. Okay. Shoot, I can't even. This would be early 20. No, this would have been 2012. 2012 itself. Yes. So the yeah my the stress level at that time, especially because it's your first case, right? So and it was the case that also did not go straight forward. So I had to get really creative and think on my feet. But I had a supervisor at that time, and so when I chatted with
Hmm.
my supervisor, they were also telling me that I think this is you should stay in this space. You should continue to do this work because you're good at it. You're good at thinking on your feet. You're good at getting creative around the problem, and you work through it. So, yeah, I think in your first case as a therapist, you always put a lot of pressure on yourself. And I think where I
Yes.
have come to today, Sanjana, I think you could relate. But what I will circle back to is with CHCP, I like that the stress is not on me. I mean, not
Yes.
that the stress is not on me, but it's so nuanced that literally your client is the one laying out the whole journey for you, and
Yes.
they're equally sort of an equal participant as you are on this journey, and it also humbles you over time because you realize that your job as well. And this is something, I've been practicing for a while, but in the earlier days, it's very easy to get into this trap that you're responsible for that person's journey. You're not. You're responsible for showing up the best way possible as a therapist. And then the client's journey and doing the best for your client. But not, and if you've been a therapist long enough, not every journey is going to be perfect. And you may not be able to journey with someone all the way till the end. I mean, this was in the past when I was not using CHCP.
I
But
completely
yeah.
agree. So I wanted to ask you that how important is it for other psychologists and people from your field to know about CHCP?
I think I've covered this in the whole conversation we've just had. Okay, so cognitive hypnotic psychotherapy. Even if you're not sort of in the space, you've not gone through all the techniques and all the processes. So, like any other therapeutic intervention, there's a lot of sort of research that has gone into this process as well. And I feel like the beauty of this process is that even if you just take the framework and you're not shopping right now for a new therapeutic tool or intervention, that means you're not looking for a specific way to resolve a client's problems. It simply as a framework is very powerful, because what it does is, as I mentioned a little bit earlier for people who have just joined in, it's a very focused framework that allows you to explore with the journey, explore with the client their journey from start to finish. You identify where they're at now, you identify where they want to go, and you also sit down and really break it down with them, the steps that need to happen in the middle, and explore where they're stuck right now and journey with them through that. So if you can map this with the client, then regardless of the techniques you're using or interventions you're using, if you can create that journey with the client, it's beautiful and it's of value, so that even you as the therapist, you're not left second guessing. Oh, okay, what's the next problem I need to tackle, or what's the next angle of this issue I need to address, or what's the next thing and the next thing. And and I also especially recommend it for therapists who are looking to work with their clients in a brief format. In other words, using processes and techniques that are brief focused interventions. And this kind of a framework is also very useful for you, because you can actually map your journey with your client through, I would say, depending on the techniques you're using. If you're actually using all of the CHCP techniques, then it's about 6 to 8 sessions on average. But if you're using other brief formats of therapy, then between 12 to 15 sessions should not cross more than that, and you should be able to get your clients to the place that you want to get them to. So, any psychotherapist tuning in right now, I believe, Sanjana, correct me if I'm wrong, but the soft C, which is the acronym for the framework that we use, is that
Yeah.
available on the ICHARS website for people to just have a
Yes, it
view
is.
of the summary? Okay, so Sanjana will leave the details in the comment box and tell you more about it. Go visit their website if you want to understand a little bit more about what we've been talking about, and explore and see if it's something that resonates with you.
Perfect. I'll be mentioning the soft C link in the comment section once we
Yeah.
are done. And Pranita has also said that I'm sure way back in 2012, people had a caveman attitude for the word therapy. Um, and she has asked that does all these cases affect you as a therapist?
Okay, so actually, no. I beg to differ. It's not as many, but people who were serious about solving their problems knew where to go to find help. And those who were really determined were finding help. It's just that now, today, and I'm very optimistic to see this, that, I thought with the COVID situation and everything that happened and the pandemic, that, mental health would still be under the rug, still be treated with its stigmas, still have its, up and down moments, etc. But I'm actually pleasantly surprised that today it isn't, and it gives me a lot of hope being in the profession that I'm in. As for cases affecting you as a person, I think, look, this is where, as a therapist, you have to be, I'm going to use a bit of a technical word here, you have to be aware of the transference and countertransference that's happening within your sessions. For a layperson, it is basically about being aware about what from the sessions may have been affecting you, and having a very good self care, and actually, I would say self awareness and self care practice around how to create that space for yourself and keep good emotional hygiene practices, so that you're not I wouldn't say you're not taking anything from the client that doesn't belong to you.
Hmm.
It's a very
Right.
simple way of saying it, but it's a mantra I keep to my mind, especially before and after I start sessions. It's something that I'm consciously set an intention for myself that I want to be in this space with my clients right now. But once it's done, then what was the client's is the client's, and what's mine is mine. So it's something that I constantly sort of even just set as an intention for myself. And then of course it's about, look, having a good self-care practice, and also I'm going to touch on MHP challenge as a practitioner as well. So, depending on where you're at, good supervision is very important. So you're speaking to
Hmm.
someone who's in your field or colleague or someone senior to you to process what you're experiencing through sessions as well. But if not for nothing, go talk to another mental health practitioner yourself if you're feeling affected by something that you have experienced. If as mental health practitioners we can't say that or we don't do that, then
Yeah.
it's not very right. Because as mental health practitioners, you're always advocating, go see a therapist when you have a problem. Go see a therapist when you have a problem. We should not be afraid to be seeing therapists when we have a problem. And that's kind of it,
Totally. I
right? That's
totally
the
agree with.
that's the stigma we really, really, really need to break.
And we as mental health practitioners, we also have our own therapist. So it's not
Yeah,
that कि हमको therapist की जरूरत नहीं है.
agree, agree. It's I think when I was journeying with ICHARS, the brilliant thing about them was you were
Hmm.
always working with someone, you were always working with someone who's a mental health practitioner with you. So throughout the whole process, even while you're learning, you're also journeying with other therapists. I would say ICHARS team, kudos to you. Even when I started practicing, it was always good to have that very direct support. And even till today, when I have issues, I know I'm able to reach someone with the team or even talk to Nitin and work through some of the case difficulties we might be having. Or hey, this thing is really bothering me. I don't know how to figure this one out. So that's kind of nice. That support system. See, I think I want to put this in a different light. We are therapists. We're not robots. We're human beings, right? So we have to also be aware and acknowledge the fact that we have emotions, and it's our responsibility as therapists who are in this field to be more responsible for our emotions and at least have self-awareness on our own emotions so that we're not bringing that to the table when we enter therapy. I think that is why it is absolutely critical. You can't be a therapist and say that I'm going to be a therapist and all those things, but at the same time bring your own stuff to therapy. That's not okay. So that's why be in check with yourself, be aware of your own emotions, and kind of have that level of awareness as a responsibility to yourself first, number one, and then to your clients.
Yes, totally.
I
And
hope
how
that
has
helps,
CS
Pranita. I know she has like lots of questions, so keep them coming.
and how has CSCP helped you in your personal life?
So this is a good segue into this, isn't it? So obviously it's been about, yeah, I think what we're in 2020. So it's been about a year, over a year plus since I completed my levels with sort of my training with CHCP. And I think the most important thing it has helped me with is this. As I explained to you, right, with the process, it's a start and a finish on where you want to go in your journey, and understanding what you need to do to get there. But the critical piece is identifying the hindrances or the obstacles that stop you from getting there. So even as therapists, while self-awareness is a really good practice, and you start to become, the more you become focused with this as a practice, and the more you
Hmm.
become dedicated to also understanding yourself, you start to become aware of some of these things. But we're still human, or we're human beings. We have that subconscious mind of ours. So this is where I will come to the point that sometimes there are unconscious blocks, limiting beliefs, even experiences and emotions that we're not consciously aware of at the top of our mind that can be holding us back. And so I feel personally that has been the biggest value add CHCP has added to my life, is to really help me become aware of these things. All these, the little hindrances and obstacles that you may not consciously be aware of at the top of your mind, to become aware of them and to address them so that I could move forward in the direction I wanted to. So I feel like that's been one of the biggest value adds for, you know, uh, the CHCP process has given me.
So, as we are coming to the end of the session, quickly, can you tell us your future plans?
Yes, happy to. I was waiting for this part to come in. I'm so excited. So, a couple of things. Firstly, I was a part of the MHP challenge. So, this is a Visit a Mental Health Practitioner's challenge. I will be continuing to post some content around it, and I will be tagging them with them, tagging you guys with it. Please, anybody watching right now, it's a very simple initiative. It's about making it okay to seek mental health help. So Sanjana is obviously going to talk about it a little bit more, maybe leave links in the comments below. But do check that out. It is sole purpose is to keep the conversation alive around mental health and that it's okay to seek mental health help. Now, in relation to this, one of my upcoming projects that I'm working on is called Mindfully You. I'm the program partner with this team. It is a program initiative by Rajiv Daswani, who owns a happiness center in Dubai. And basically, we're teaming up together to create an initiative that focuses on empowering people with mental health. In other words, is basically creating a whole proactive approach where you can go and engage and experience what it is like to initiate, an engagement with mental health. Means, for example, so I'll clarify that a little bit more. It's a program that is designed to create a series of steps so that a person can start to become aware of their own state of mental health and well-being, and provides them with tools and resources that helps them to address their mental well-being, and then moving forward connects them to working on a one-on-one journey with people. So it's a step-by-step process that you can proactively take in order to create, in order to take control of your internal mental health and well-being. So, where this has always been a stigmatized space where when I'm in crisis, I'm going to go seek help. We're designing this program to be okay, we're all now pretty much in that state. How can we take control of it? How can we feel empowered and take the first step to creating that change within us? So that's kind of the focus of the program. We're looking forward to rolling that out soon. So that's what I'm working on. And as Mind Wellness, I am still offering sessions and working with clients one-on-one. So if you're interested, that the link to Mind Wellness will also be in the comments below.
Sure, I'll also mention that. Pranita has said that. Thank you, Nisha.
Oh, thanks, Pranita. It was so lovely to have chatted with you.
And as we're in the end of the session, thank you, Nisha, for your valuable time and your inputs. Thank you, audience, for asking us beautiful questions. And I would also like to announce that from next month, that is our fifth episode of Alumni Talks. We would be having it on Instagram Live at the same time, that is 7:30 to 8:30 p.m. IST. And our Instagram handle is ICHARS. So see you all, everyone, next Wednesday, and we'll be in conversation with a counseling psychologist.
Brilliant.